Good evening, good folks, and welcome to the City of Muskegon City Commission special work session for this Tuesday, May 30th. The primary order of business is a presentation on our forthcoming budget from our city manager, Jonathan Seifert. And we do have one formal action item thereafter pertaining to a gaming license for an event coming up this weekend, so it is a time-sensitive matter. And then we'll have public comment reserved at the end of the meeting for anyone wishing to come to the podium and give comment or phone in their public comment. So without further ado, we will start with the budget presentation.
Yes, thank you. So I'm going to go up to the podium so I can run my computer. I did for the commissioners hard copy of the PowerPoint presentation that I'm going to be giving is at the dais for you as well. And at the end, obviously, if you have questions as we're going, by all means. But if you have, we do have a section at the end for discussion and questions. So this is generally how I see the presentation going, kind of giving some budget priorities and highlights, dive a little bit into the general fund revenues and expenses. And then talk about some of the dedicated funds. The dedicated funds, one that'll primarily be, Director Vanderheid will be up here for that part of the conversation, and then we'll move into the commission discussion. This is not a finished budget yet. I wanted to get your input before we put the actual budget book together, in case there's things that you want to move around. This is kind of a high-level presentation, and then we're going to dive into some of the discretionary items that we have in the budget this year to get your feedback on that, because those are the items that we can move around and things of that nature. So as staff was putting this budget together, we were looking at several priorities, one of the largest of which, and the largest shift in our expenditures this year, was standing up a Parks and Recs department. That is where you'll see probably the largest single shift in one department for this year. We are going to continue to make some ongoing investments, and this is a deliberate choice of terms, investment, in our Trinity Health Arena, in our Hartshorn Marina, and in our parks, again related to the Parks and Rec conversation. Staff looked at our long-term goals as we went through this budget discussion. We had several days where Director Grant and I met with each of the division heads and their individual department heads to go through this, and we were looking at things. What's our environmental impact? This is our first year where that's part of our budget, and in one of the items in this year's budget is that carbon impact study that we'll do to determine where we're starting and how we move forward. DEI is part of this. And community engagement is a big part of this. This is another area where this year, this is the first full year where we'll have a community engagement office. And so we are investing in community engagement, and I'll talk about that a little as well. We also have some one-time investments that we want to make sure that we're making to keep up with our capital improvement plan. A big part of the budget discussion is the capital improvement budget. And that's something that goes out several years, and a lot of those are built upon items from previous years building on the next year. And I'm going to run back up and grab my water just a second. Good day. Oh, thank you, sir.
Yep.
I apologize, everyone. So we want to make sure that those one-time investments to our capital improvement planning keeps on track. And some of those highlights here, boiler at City Hall, build out of the second floor, and some general equipment purchases, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. So general revenue, general fund revenue, this is being broken down into several different buckets. These aren't official buckets by any kind of state terms or things like that. These are buckets as I was looking at the budget, determined the best way to describe them. So income tax, that's pretty self-explanatory. That's only income tax. We are looking to see about a 4.5%, a little more than 4.5% increase in income tax next year. This continues a trend that we've seen the past couple of years. So we expect to see that one go up as well. Property tax projections, we're also expecting to see an increase of about 7%. We are not seeing a Headley rollback this year. but we do expect one in the following year. Inflation was higher than the cap, so that's why we were allowed to grow without having that rollback. So we're looking at about 6.7 million in property taxes. State revenue sharing. We are projecting an increase in state revenue sharing of about 10%, and this is coming directly from state budget discussions. This could be something that changes when the final state budget is amended, but we are building that into there, so that's at about $6.65 million. Other buckets that we're looking at here, building fees. Now this is everything, this is only within the building department or safe built. We're looking for that to increase about 16%. I will say,
Mr. Manager, would you entertain questions throughout your presentation?
Yes.
All right. I saw Commissioner Ramsey over there with his
Okay.
red pen. Eagerly wanted to ask something.
I did. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Sorry, Mr. Manager. When we talk about the state revenue projection and that
Yep.
shared revenue, how many years in the past have we actually been able to participate in that program because the state has released those funds to us as opposed to saying that they would and then not?
well, so this is made up of replacement for PPT, the personal property tax, our constitutional revenue sharing, and the city, village, township revenue sharing. Which one? Oh, Ken, which one's based on sales tax? The constitutional. So those ones are pretty steady as far as what the projections are.
Okay.
Yeah. Going into the building department, were there any other questions before I continue? Okay, cool. Building department, so this is safe built, 16% increase is what we're projecting here to about 1.45 million. This number is a little conservative depending on how many of the numerous projects that we have in the pike right now actually come to fruition in this next year. However, most of this is dollars that would be passed through to Safe Built as our building contractor. So we are looking at an increase there. Parking fee projections, we do have flat at about $800,000. These are round numbers. These aren't the actual, like, all the way to the decimal point numbers. Marijuana fees, we're also looking at that being mostly flat as well, at $625. General fees. Now, what are general fees? These are vacant building fees, tax collection, court, zoning enforcement, cemetery lot sales. So they're a whole variety of different things. Again, these are buckets that I've put them into, but I have notes to make sure that as we go forward, we're consistent with looking at those. We are looking at an increase in the general fees of about $145,000, just a little more than $5 million. Public safety revenue, that is not an official bucket of money. It's just monies that generally relate to public safety matters, including impound fees, traffic fines and fees, things of that nature. That one is projected to go down slightly to about $586,000. The biggest difference you're going to see in our general fund this year is the transfers in from other funds. The past couple years, we have had COVID dollars coming into the general fund to the tune of about $4 million. This year, we're looking at about $430,000 being transferred in from other funds in this regard. So that's where you're going to see the biggest shift in our fund. I will point out that even with this money coming out, because of our other revenues going up, we're able to absorb that change rather easily. And then looking at how we're handling our public improvement funds for some of our one-time costs. And then the last bucket, 2 buckets of general fund revenue, other revenue, which this is things such as pilot fees, payment in lieu of taxes, special assessments, federal grants, city services to enterprise funds, reimbursement for election costs. So this is a wide variety of things. This one's also looking to be down slightly. And then the last one, indirect cost allocations. I'm going to try to explain this, but I might have to have Director Grant come up here and help me. But the indirect cost allocations, these are costs for services that the general fund provides that all funds have to participate in, things like the audit. So these are numbers that come in from these other budget areas, and that's projected to be up slightly. Is that correct? That's correct. Okay, cool. So when you look at our entire general fund budget as percents, this is the percent breakdown of each of these areas. Our single largest is income tax at 28%, and with property taxes, and property taxes and state revenues both coming in at 17%, with everything else coming in lower than that. The only other one over 10% is that general fees category that we went over. So general fund expenditures, and I'm going to dive into this a little bit more, but I'm starting with the pie chart here so you can kind of keep this in mind as we're going through the conversation. One-time capital projects within the general fund make up about 1% of our total, and this is about $39 million in our general fund budget. Transfer to other funds, 4%. We'll dive into that in a little bit. Police and fire, 29 and 11% respectively. Parks, 9%. That is an increase. Sanitation, 6%, and that's pretty much a pass-through related to our trash service, and then administrative services, which are all the other services that we offer a lot of times here at City Hall to the public. So one of the things that I wanted to talk to you guys about with our general fund expenditure is specifically our project list. So you have this bullet pointed list, which is in your PowerPoint presentation, but there is also a sheet on the dais at your seat called Budget Report for City of Muskegon and Additional Detail General Fund. This is probably a sheet that you've seen before. I added 2 tables at the bottom that include over a number of these slides, these different projects. These are generally would be considered our discretionary projects and are things that aren't related to ongoing operations, staffing, or things of that nature. So some of the requests that we're looking to fulfill this year, public safety is requesting drone, that we start a drone program. This would be the cost of bringing 1 drone on. Ultimately, we would like 2, so we would bring another one in the following fiscal year. We did budget for the flock camera system at $72,000. Upgrade of the evidence room. So the evidence room is kind of shifted into 2 different areas right now. Captain Rush, I don't know if you want to, can you talk about the state of the evidence room a little bit, or? Sure. I gave him 30 seconds to know he was going to.
Yeah, good evening. The evidence room is just, it's kind of like with our building structure we have right now. It's just dated at this point, and with our actual accreditation that we have, we need to update to the point where we meet our accreditation for our law enforcement side. So there's various things that we need to try to do, whether it be through different pass-through lockers, or there's different ways as far as chain of custody that we need to make sure that's completed and up to date with our accreditation, just so we stay with our parameters.
Thank you, sir. We also are looking to continue to update some of our fire equipment. This is specifically related to the turnout gear that our firefighters wear when responding to fires. The old turnout gear was waterproofed with a PFAS material. We need to stop using those. So this is the cost to replace those. And this is also included in this cost of fire equipment is some scuba regulator equipment as well. Another item within the general fund that we're looking to do is to finish the build out on the 2nd floor of City Hall. And this is a multi-year project. As I'm sure most of you are aware, about 1/3 of the 2nd floor is currently gutted and is not usable. The plan would be to finish out the 2nd floor of City Hall, expand the administrative offices just a little bit, basically to where the city manager's office used to be, and then the other majority of that space where engineering used to be would be for community police and detectives, would move upstairs. And then once that's finished, what that would allow us to do in the following year is make some improvements here on the 1st floor, probably ultimately getting road patrol out of the basement and then allowing us to remodel in the basement as well. So this is a multi-year plan that we would need to look at to be able to make those changes. Outreach and branding. So this one is a little bit of a nebulous thing, but this is part of our community engagement with Director Sweet, and this is includes several different things. $24,000 for Zen City, which is our boards that we've been using for our community engagement boards. We've been on a trial for the first 10 months roughly. In October, we'll have to vote if we want to enter into the contract, which will go for a total of 5 years. So this is budgeting to continue that. We also want to update our video and photo library of the city. The city has changed a lot since the last time we did that. So we're budgeting about $12,000 to do that. As well as money for summer interns to help within the community engagement department. This first year, those interns would be used to help with neighborhood association engagement. And then the biggest chunk, the biggest single chunk, about $50,000 would be to update graphics to a consistent theme. We have about 7 logos that we use right now. The police department has one, fire department has one, Public Works has a couple. We have our traditional logo that we've had for a number of years. We've got the Watch Muskegon logo. So this would be an effort to try to get some type of common branding. You may have noticed, I think the chief mentioned this in our meeting last week, that we're out of the gold swooshes for the police cars, and so as opposed to ordering more because we know we're going to change it, we're just going down to Muskegon Police. That's in an effort to kind of help keep those consistent. So that would be part of that as well. The Neighborhood Grants and Beautification Awards. So this is a typo. I've got 174. It should be 175. That's what's on your sheet. 175, and that is the Beautification Awards and the Neighborhood Association grants. We also would like to continue our investment of $20,000 in the Muskegon Public Schools Youth Rec Program. It's something we've done for a number of years. $80,000, this is also something that we've done for a number of years in the Boys and Girls Club. Traditionally, this has been in the CDBG budget, but because of some deadlines, we would need to move it into the general fund this year if we wanted to continue that. And then we've got parks and recs, maintenance equipment, not very exciting things, but trailers, blowers, carts, things of that nature that we need to help maintain our parks. The biggest chunk of our one-time expenses are coming in our public improvement budget. This is outside of the general fund, and these dollars are generally replenished through the sale of homes and things of that and properties that we have, but is intended for things like updating our buildings, buying new fire trucks, things of that nature. We're currently using this fund to build out the new fire truck that's coming.
Mr. Manager.
Yes, sir.
Before you go, can you go back one slide?
Sure.
For a moment. I think Vice Mayor German had a question on that slide.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Johnson. Manager Seifert, you mentioned deadlines. I think it was on either the Boys and Girls Club but I want to talk about the youth program with the Muskegon Public Schools, because I know there was some problems last year. They didn't meet the deadlines.
Mm-hmm.
So it's will something go out to notify them that these funds are available to them so they can get the necessary paperwork and stuff in? Because I don't want them to have to go through the same process that they went through last time.
So I believe both of these are out of the general fund. Director Carson, did you have any on the process on their timelines that they've missed in the past? Okay, the boys and girls one?
No.
Okay.
Is there a deadline for them to submit for
For the Muskegon Public Schools, our youth program.
Right, but I think what the Vice Mayor was asking was in the future, how do we communicate that out?
It goes out in,
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
for students.
Okay.
It'll go out in the paper, it'll go out on our social media platforms.
Okay, so for this year here, they still have time, or is it too late to sub?
So that one's passed.
That's
Yeah.
passed.
Yeah,
Okay.
so this is an effort to try to make up that difference.
Okay.
For those dollars that were, that had been coming through other sources.
Okay, just one other
sure.
question. Okay, and for the Neighborhood Grants Beautification Awards, okay, because I know some grants was giving out some certificates to, if I'm remember correctly, in the Jackson Hill area. And I oversee that area as a commissioner, but there were some concerns about not being inclusive with other neighborhoods like Nelson, McLaughlin, and Angel. And that was one of the concerns that I addressed last time. So with this funding being allocated for the specific item, how will those grants be dispersed to make sure that other neighborhoods are able to receive those grants?
So right now, that number, we are looking at if we have enough flexibility to increase that number. Director Ekholm had asked that it be increased to 90?
For
Yeah.
an equivalent amount for all 15 neighborhoods.
For all 15
The
neighborhoods?
reason that not all neighborhoods were included initially is because it was a pilot program. Figure out if it would be useful and effective, and so we determined that it is, so we're requesting in this budget to have $6,000 per neighborhood for those youth.
Okay. Okay, okay, last question. With the youth program, we allocating $20,000. Is it possible we could actually, I guess, squeeze a little bit more to those programs, to that specific program?
So I think for the MPS youth program, that's the amount that they had requested, they'd
That's what
received
they
traditionally in the
requested,
past. So I don't know that more funding in that one is needed, especially in combination with some of the other programs that various organizations are offering. I don't know if Kyle would have a better input on that or not with other programs that are offered. But back to the beautification awards, if that's a line item the commission would like to see increased, we can have that discussion and how that would work. So, but it is a request that had come through.
Can you or Director Karczewski speak to that $20,000 allocation, or whomever was handling that, the $20,000 allocation to the MPS Youth Rec? And does that? So I'm kind of while we're on this subject,
Yep.
I had reached out a couple weeks ago or a few weeks ago inquiring about the youth rec program that happens at Muskegon High School. It has in years past. It got disrupted through COVID, and it got disrupted through construction at the high school. And I was wondering if that's going to be revived this year, or what the outlook is. And I was wondering, since we're on this topic, if you might have any update, and does this money go towards that?
So as far as the MPS Youth Rec, I'm not aware of that. I haven't had any contact or conversation with it. I have been working with the schools on summer programming, but this is something that's been running for a long time. I believe it'd be more CDBG that this would run through, correct? Yeah.
Basketball.
Yep. For their youth sports, which is, I mean, I honestly, on my first couple weeks, I looked into it. Could we do youth sports? Then I guess I just heard through the grapevine that we do fund youth recreation to the school, so I just kind of stopped there. Heard they took care of it and do a good job. So, and then as far as the YMCA programs, I actually met with the executive director of the YMCA this afternoon, and we spoke about trying to revive that program. She's new; she started in April, so a lot of new people around. She said it's probably too late for her to get that started, but it'll be a goal for next year.
Okay. Thanks for the update.
Yep.
And then Commissioner Ramsey.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I mean, as long as we're asking questions. Mr. Manager, I might be a little confused, so I would like you to correct me.
Okay.
Gingerly. When we talk about MPS Youth Rec, Boys and Girls Club Rec, and Parks and Rec maintenance equipment,
Yep.
is that not coming out of the dollars that we are awarding to the Parks and Rec department?
So
And why?
So the Parks and Rec maintenance equipment is out of the Parks and Rec budget, but it's within the general fund. There's other projects within Parks and Rec, in a couple of slides we'll get there, that have multiple buckets of money that Parks and Rec is being funded out of, including the public improvement budget, about $150,000, and then the largest chunk is out of the ARPA funding.
Right.
Yeah,
So, and how much is that chunk out of the ARPA funding, Mr. Manager?
1.5 million.
1.5 million.
Yes.
So how much total budget will the new Parks and Rec programming have moving into our next fiscal year?
That's in a couple slides.
Then I will come back to my question.
All right.
Yes. And then the first part of your question, the youth rec and the Boys and Girls Club, no, that's not coming out of the rec budget.
Why?
Yep. Why?
Why?
Well, the Boys and Girls one had traditionally come out of CDBG dollars, but because community development block grant.
Block grant dollars.
Yep. CNS. And then the youth rec one has been something that's just been allocated out of a different budget line for a couple of years, so.
So I'm sure that
Yeah.
you can understand where I'm trying to go with this. Is
Yes.
that if we have all of this money, not that there couldn't be more, young man, don't make me laugh. I don't understand why it's coming out of all of these different places. And if we're going to put a bunch of investment into Parks and Rec,
Yep.
let's do that. Like, let's build it right instead of having to retrofit. And how do we make sure that budgets moving forward are going to be able to sustain what we're looking to do before we start piecemealing it out? Because that was my thing in the first place. And Mr. Mayor, I know that you remember that because we've had many conversations about it. I just want to make sure that we build something that is sustainable so that in a couple of years we're not scratching to get it back together and leave people with disappointment. So anytime that we can streamline some of this stuff, I would appreciate seeing that because my neighbors would better understand it.
So some of what I'm doing with these general fund expenses project list is these are some discretionary items that we have outside of the regular departments that we're offering. The revenue that we're getting can support our projected staffing levels and programming levels. There are one-time costs that can get moved around from year to year, and these are within those areas that can get moved around. So I don't think it's necessarily. I wouldn't say that it's piecemealing together things from Parks and Rec. Could we take that 20,000 and 80,000 and put it into our own Parks and Rec? We could. But we've traditionally supported these programs, and so if it was something that we were going to dial back over time, it might be better to telegraph that ahead of time and allow these organizations time to
Absolutely.
adjust.
And I'm not saying take away these organizations' money because there's never enough resources and
Right.
there's always a ton of work.
Yep.
But if this is happening, I want to know why it's not happening out of our Parks and Recs budget. And then you said because they're one-off pieces, but then you turned around and said, that sounds accusatory and that's not how I mean it, Jonathan, I'm sorry.
You're
But
good.
then you said that we traditionally and historically have given this money, da-da-da-da-da. So I want to know, if it's an opportunity that we are partnering through collaborative financial support, why is this not being ran through Parks and Rec and considered a part of Parks and Rec? Does that make sense?
That makes sense. And I wasn't saying, I'm saying that these are one-time things and they're not things that we're required to do, if that makes sense.
But we do them
But we have-
traditionally,
but we have
historically,
done them.
annually.
Yes.
So they're not that.
No, not at all.
Yeah, no, I mean, I've made my point twice now. So,
And right now, for all of us that are aware, Parks and Recreation is operating through the general fund. So it's not
Correct.
a separate designated budget, separate from there. Just to be clear, it is
Correct.
operating within the general fund. But my expectation, at least, and I hope to see this, I'm hopefully not speaking out of turn, but my expectation was that we will see a Parks and Recreation budget. It's
also
gonna be-
my expectation.
Yes, it's going to be housed, within the general fund, but we will see the numbers specific to Parks and Recreation budget, just so that we have an
Right.
understanding of the dollars going in, how the dollars are going out, being spent.
Yes,
Even if they
where.
are technically accounted for through the general fund,
Absolutely.
we will still see a dedicated, or we will still see a budget outline for Parks and Recreation. And so, even though this is CDBG, we may end up seeing that in the Parks and Recreation budget because it's a pass-through revenue and pass-through cost.
And there are, so for Parks and Recreation, there's two departments within the general fund budget that make that up, the recreation department and the parks maintenance, which make up that budget. So in a couple of slides, when we talk about that whole budget, that you'll see that whole number.
Wonderful.
And we did have a conversation last year, and we can revisit it in the future. We're not going to revisit it for this budget cycle, but down the road, if there is the merits for such, we could explore having a separate, dedicated Parks and Recreation budget separate from the general fund.
Yes.
That's not where we're at right now, and for a number of different technical reasons, we're not exploring that at this moment. But if that is something that the commission feels very strongly about in the future, we can further explore the technical capacity and what all that means without trying to be overly burdensome with limited value and benefit in doing so. But yes, because we have to recognize and respect staff's
Yes.
capacity. All right, Mr. Manager.
Cool. So now these budget items are outside of the general fund. This is the public improvement budget. And so we're looking, and as I was saying before, this is traditionally where we have funds that we maintain our buildings, buy properties, and buy fire trucks, upbuild fire trucks, things of that nature. So for this coming year, starting in July, we're looking at doing a City Hall boiler replacement. That's about $600,000. This is one of those things within the capital improvement plan that we need to do before we do our next step, which is roof replacement. And this will also allow us to help meet some of our goals from becoming carbon neutral, as that'll be a more efficient heating system for us. Development service projects of about 1.2 million. There's several things within this bucket. $520,000 would be purchasing of the DMDC parking lot downtown that we've talked about. Excuse me. Infill land purchases of about $500,000. So that's a designated $500,000 that would allow the city to buy lots as they became available that we could then use for our infill housing program. And then also $200,000 earmarked for the moving of the Nelson House. It would be anticipated that the Nelson House cost would be offset by the sale of the property by about $100,000. Fire station number 5, which is the one out on Marquette, it needs its roof replaced. One of the times that I was out there, it was actually actively dripping. I don't know if, Jay, if you want to have any comments on the roof, or it just needs to be replaced. Yeah.
That needs to be replaced. It's like 1970s vintage.
Okay. Yeah. So, so we want to make sure our folks that are working out of that station have a dry place to work. Parks capital planning, $150,000. Now, this is specifically related to the master planning process. This $150,000 comes in the public improvement fund through the convention center. And so this is outside the general fund, which is why it's in a different bucket. And then this one, the south building at Pierre Marquette, I don't know, Kyle, if you want to talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, really just that it's.
Or the next page is you too.
It's set to be, we're not gonna do it this summer, but it's set to be updated here after the summer, or after the busy season.
Profound.
All right. Go ahead, do your thing.
Okay, so so this is the total Parks and Rec budget that we were talking about. This year, Parks and Rec is being funded through basically 3 buckets of money to the total tune of about $4.5 million. Just under $3 million, or 2.973, is only out of the general fund. 1.5 million is out of ARPA, and that's specifically for park upgrades. The first number is that operational number that we would have ongoing. The 1.5 is the upgrades, and the 150,000, which is coming out of public improvement that we just talked about, relates to the planning for how we're going to spend the ARPA dollars. So Kyle is here if you've got any questions.
Yeah, so as far as what was updated from the parks budget, it was already pretty healthy. It was close to 2.5 million. It's what we've added is my salary, a couple event specialist salary who will help with recreation programming and all the tasks that that a robust city with a lot of programs would need to have there. Also some instructor salary. We'd like to have some fitness classes. And we also have a program budget put together. And then your typical, with having employees in a budget, you have your office supplies, some computer size supplies here and there, some money to be running some events that we'd like to do in the community, contractual services, and then of course, there's equipment to start up all these programs that we haven't had in 15 years. Commissioner Ramsey.
Thank you, Carl. So what I hear you saying effectively is that, and John, or Mr. Manager, you've also shared it, is that really the money that we're looking like, so that our neighbors at home can hear this, that sit in the Parks and Rec budget is the 2.9. The 1.5 is the ARPA, and the 150,000. That's something that is special and happening. So when our neighbors are calling us to reference the $4.5 million that we're dumping into Parks and Rec, please understand that there's only a 2.9 operating budget, and a lot of that is going to a lot of these, like you shared, Kyle, new startup costs, because it has been, what is it, 15 years? 15 years since we've had any kind of Parks and Rec department, so that it may not be this large in subsequent years, but that this amount of money is necessary now to get the beast to move.
Correct. Correct. And could you bring up? Sorry to call you out there. The
Did he wait and right until you took a drink? Yeah.
Sorry.
I gave you 2 attachments. The one that's
Yes.
got a more lengthy title.
Wow.
This one?
Yeah. And if you could, am I scrolling or you? Big.
Oh, actually.
Something.
That's what happened? Oh. Let me turn this off. Just a second. There we
If
go.
you could scroll down to the next one. There's 3 pages there.
Okay.
Yeah, stop right there. So you can see as far as the budget goes, on the third, this is from the National Recreation Park Agency. It shows what your typical operating budget is. So from 20,000 to 50,000 residents, the low end would be about 2.1 million. The high end would be 6.7 million. And so we're talking about under 3 million. I think that's, a pretty small budget for the size of the population we have. I don't have that up. I don't have this slide up there as well, but on average, you're looking at about, I think it's 1,000 people to every 10 acres, and we are at 1,000 people every 40 acres as far as how much park acres that we have. So we are well above the national average. So, I mean, I think, 3 million is a big number, but I think we're operating,
Right. It's still fair and just for our neighbors, and we're not being give me a good word, Mr. Mayor. Frivolous. Thank you, Mr. Manager. With our money, but we also understand that we want to provide wonderful services that are sustainable and ongoing, and that's why it looks like this year.
Yes, sir.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Yep. Yeah, do you guys want to hear any update on the master plan or anything like that? I mean, it's just the
We
appropriate
can
time
get
to.
into that. I presume we can get into that when we are doing the review of that full-on budget.
Okay.
Maybe.
Yeah, great.
Yeah, you can do it whenever you like.
Yeah. Well, it's whatever we'd like.
Yeah.
But I know tonight is the presentation on just the general outline of the budget, as well as understanding some of the discretionary options that we have, so that we can chew on that and give feedback as to which are the priorities. Because there are certain things that we have to spend money on. There are other things that we have latitude, and we need to give some feedback as to where and how that money should be used. So, if you want to give a quick
Well,
update,
just as far as how there was
sure.
1.5 million in there for ARPA, we had just discussed because this money can be used between now and 2026. So we did want to put some money into the budget in case because we want to get to work. There's a lot of stuff we can't get to work on, and so that was. Could you pull up the other attachment that I had for you? So we've just been identifying what parks are our concern. This is getting into the woods. I know you guys have a lot to deal with. This is kind of my steering document that's helping us to put together
Equity-centered capital.
a list of all the parks, and it will give us a non-biased matrix, scoring it from high to low of which park needs the most help. So that's this 1.5 million. There's a lot of low-hanging fruit. This isn't the end all for how we're going to spend the ARPA money, but it's actually I worked with Grand Rapids uses it. I learned about it at the Michigan Parks conference, and I've been working with them I've met with them twice now about the best way to have use this money the best, have it spread out equitably throughout our city, and this is the kind of the document that's helping us get there.
Fantastic. I really like to see that equity-centered capital investment plan.
Yeah, it's great. It's really, it really promotes that every neighborhood's going to be included. Not everyone can. Some people are working, multiple jobs, have 3 kids at home, and can't make the meeting. So this helps us so that every master plan meeting we have, regardless of how many people can show up, there's still, every park is going to be important, and it's going to be ranked on the most needed area to be served.
Wonderful. This is a great start to the revival of our Parks and Recreation Department.
Yes, it is.
And I imagine our general fund operating for the parks next year will look differently than this year, because we'll be further along in the build out and
Yep.
getting that department going. And then the master planning process will help inform that. So by this time next year, though, we expect our Parks and Recreation master plan to be completed.
Yeah, we plan on doing updates as early as late summer
Okay.
this year. So, yeah, I'm working with Deborah, and she
So
she
we're
goes.
lining up those engagement opportunities and outreach and okay,
Absolutely.
excellent. So that plan will be available and codified before the budget cycle next year. All right.
Yes.
Excellent. Thank you, Director Karczewski. Any questions for our Parks and Recreation Director, right quick? Vice Mayor German.
Yeah, just a slide for that equity centered investment plan. Is that possible? You can send that to the commission or send it.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I like to.
And just so you know, it was formed by GARE, Government Alliance on Race and Equity. That's who really made this, developed this, really for disenfranchised populations who don't traditionally have a voice when you have these big meetings, or just to make sure that every voice is heard. But I'll tell you, it goes across the map because it also goes. There's also things just like park asset lifespan and the condition of the highly used items. So it's not going to knock anyone out of the range because every park has assets that are well past the lifespan. So,
And speaking of that lifespan, that is one of the reasons why we're not. We've done a soft commitment of $4.5 million to our Parks and Recreation, but that lifespan aspect, not to mention supply chain constraints and staffing constraints and whatnot, one of the reasons why we're not putting all of the $4.5 million to work in our capital projects in our parks right away. Mm-hmm. It's going to be spaced out over a number of years. So, all right. Thank you.
welcome.
Well, the staff's recommending it be spaced out for a number of years.
It's up to us to decide in the end.
Some of our other general highlights from the budget, and this isn't just specifically related to the general fund, but one thing I do want to point out, and this is really exciting, the farmers market is projected to break even this year. Great work, Ann, and her team. I didn't want that to get by without making note of that. So we are going to be shifting staff and adding some new staff to the city. 2 event staff are going to be moving over to Parks and Rec. That will create a hole in the clerk's office, so we'll be creating a new position in the clerk's office. We'll also be adding a new staff member in the finance department. As we continue to grow as a city, the finance department is stretched pretty thin, and there is a need there for additional staff. We're also looking at bringing another business development person into development services to help to make sure that we're hitting all of our businesses and providing resources there that they need to continue to grow and thrive here in the city of Muskegon. And then lastly, the other kind of big staffing changes, we're looking at enhancing our HR contract with the county. So what does that mean? One of the things that we've been that's been made clear to us over the past couple of months is that not having a full-time HR person on staff in the city creates some challenges for us. Our relationship with the county is great, and they provide a lot of really good resources to us. So we went back to the county and said, could we tweak this contract to allow for a full-time HR person to be housed here at the city? It'd still be a county employee, but that way they would have the resources and the depth of knowledge that the county HR office has, but they'll be able to build relationships here at the city with our staff so that our staff members, our directors, feel comfortable going to them when they have an HR issue that comes up, and they can kind of work through that process. So this would be a change in the HR contract, which was up this year anyway, so we needed to look at it. So we do have a proposal from the county that is worked into this budget, and if we'll be meeting with the county later this week to kind of iron out some specific details, and then we'll bring that contract to you. But this is something that I'm excited about, having this person to be able to build relationships with our staff and also spend time in other city facilities, so that way we're sure that we're getting that HR service across all of our departments. Any questions on that? So I'm going to turn it over to Director Franzik. Oh, there he is. He's hiding behind the pillar.
So at a previous meeting, we discussed lowering the percentage of the money we get from the excise tax from 35% down to 30%. I believe our allocation this year was $622,000. We said we were going to use 30% of that for the MSEP, which would give us $186,600. Last year, we went with 40% for grants and loans, which was up 10% from the previous years. 30% went to education and harm reduction, and 30% to expungements. What we are proposing this year is to keep the grants and loans the same, 40%, which would give us nearly $75,000 to work with. We'd like to possibly keep the education at the same level. We're doing the anti-vaping education for the next 13 months now with the schools. That would give us just under $56,000, and I believe we're probably going to be good on the expungements. We have 3 that we're funding up until early winter next year. We also have a 4th one that's going to be put on by a private company, Indigo. So there's also expanded measures how you can do expungements online right now as well. So what we were suggesting is maybe putting some of that money towards different types of funding, which we don't exactly have identified yet. But with your guidance, I believe we could come up with some worthy programs to help put some investment back into the city. Some of our ideas were to maybe bolster the home beautification program we have with CNS. I believe they give between $200 and $400 to homeowners to help make improvements to their home. A lot of times I think they feel like that's not quite enough to make some big improvements. We also have a lot of money through the ARC program going to parks. There's something we could possibly team with on that. The CNS department also has neighborhood association grants, between $2,000 and $3,000 for neighborhood associations. Some of them also feel like that's not quite enough money to accomplish some of their goals, so maybe there's a way we could target some of the neighborhoods that have a large number of dispensaries or grow facilities in their neighborhood. We could also do some investing into improvements into the neighborhoods where these are located. We've talked about possibly doing some street improvements or pedestrian walkability measures in some of these areas. And CNS also has, some gap funding requests where the whole multitude of programs that they give out, sometimes there's a little bit of a gap where they're not able to fully fund a program that would be beneficial. So there's a possibility we could also incorporate some of that money into a fund like that. Thoughts?
I have a question with regard to the expungement clinics, because you mentioned we're funding 3, and then there's the private one happening thereafter. I thought we were going to be supporting that one as well. No, we're going with 2 of the 3. Okay,
Yeah.
we are. Okay.
We're assisting in that as well. We're not
Okay.
fully funding it though.
But we are going to be providing resources
Yes.
to defray the cost for our city residents participating in that expungement clinic.
Yes. we
Okay,
will be.
excellent.
So that's 4,
Okay.
and that's going to take us all the way up until almost next year's allocation. So
Okay. In which case, we still see the need, and we can potentially just wait until next year's allocations
Yeah.
to fund it. So that leaves us with how much?
we got about just under $56,000 to.
For that bucket
Yeah.
to figure out alternatives.
Yeah.
So we might want to still allocate something to expungement just to have it there to put us in a better position in the event that there's still a need. But then we have to figure out what to do with the rest. So are you looking for thoughts right now, or are you looking for us to chew on this, reflect on this, and confer with you and our city manager as to how we may be able to use the remaining balance of those marijuana social equity program dollars?
I think maybe I'm just looking for a blessing to maybe propose something for that additional 30%. Maybe at a future work session, maybe we can allocate it for expungements now, but knowing that it's probably going to change.
Yeah, certainly would welcome that. I'll just say my first blush thoughts is that I'm intrigued about the possibility of supplementing CNS and some of the programming that they do to serve our lower to moderate income folks in terms of priority service repairs and facade siding and some of the other assistance programs that we have available. So that's just where my thoughts are at the moment. But I would welcome alternative ideas or whatever program presentation you want to bring to us in the future.
I like streetlights.
What was that, Commissioner Ramsey?
I like streetlights.
You like streetlights? Meaning you would like streetlights where? Like just
No.
getting us more streetlights
Yeah.
throughout our city?
Yeah,
or?
throughout the city.
Okay. So that would be a policy we would need to reevaluate as well then. Because I believe our current policy is, well, we'll delve into the current policy another time. So we'll reevaluate that. Any other questions or thoughts with regard to our social equity programming using the marijuana excise tax revenues?
Just a comment.
Yes, Vice Mayor German.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Just a comment and just a good job to Director Franzik. A couple years ago, this program wasn't even thought of, or what he went through to get it where it's at now, and some of the people that actually played a role of bringing this to the city. This was something that was not well received at that time when we talked about a marijuana social equity program, and now we have it up and running. For those communities that was underserved or due to the prohibition of marijuana, incarcerated, and that goes not just for people of color or black, but that was anybody that was actually impacted due to the prohibition of marijuana and due to incarceration. I think it gives them opportunity to be partakers in this industry, and I just want to say thanks to Director Franzik and then our former city manager, Frank Peterson, at that time, who was open to allow Mr. Collins and McGuffey and those guys to sit down and have these conversations to get this process started. And I think for the most part of it, we see the benefits and how it's going to benefit the city and the people in the community. Yep, so good job.
Thank you, Vice Mayor German. I would also add that just some first blush thoughts that I would be interested in potentially putting more money towards business and grants with an emphasis on supporting non-cannabis entrepreneurial opportunities within our cannabis districts because we want that to become diversified and not be solely cannabis. So that would appeal or be of interest to me. So just a couple more cents for you.
Sure.
Meanwhile, in the same vein as piggybacking on Vice Mayor German, I do want to just give a shout out to our former Commissioner, Deborah Warren. She was a passionate advocate for creating the social equity program and funding it. So, along with other members of the commission, but I want to give a shout out to our former Commissioner, Deborah Warren, on that. So, all right. Thank you, Director Franzik.
All right, thank you.
As I noted at the beginning of the presentation, the general fund is going to continue to invest in some of our other assets here in the city. These investments are into non-general fund funds, but we are recommending that we continue investment into the Marina Fund and to the tune of $600,000. This is to keep us in line with our debt elimination plan we have with the state in that regard. This is an investment as it is a service that we provide to the community. And for Trinity Health Arena, about $400,000 is being recommended for this year. That $400,000 represents about 18% of the arena's revenue. So they do cover the vast majority of their expenses there, and this is an investment that we're choosing to make to continue to have that amenity there for our residents, neighbors, and guests. Also looking at a $200,000 investment into the LDFA fund, and then $230,000 investment into engineering services. And this is a department within Public Works, and the next couple of slides are also on Public Works, so Director Vanderhyde can come up and join me if you have any specific questions about how the general fund investment works into engineering services. But if not, then we'll just go into the Public Works.
I don't have a question about that, but what, on our detailed one, what's the difference then between the Mercy Health Arena Fund and the Arena Fund? Like, the Mercy Health one doesn't carry over to the 2023-24.
Oh, that's right, just a change.
Is that just
So
Okay,
change
that's
in
fine.
terms, yeah. So on these, a lot of times on your budget sheets, and this does get confusing.
Yes.
If you have a fund name change, or if you have a fund that previously had an allocation in the previous year and doesn't have one in the following year, you generally see it carry over until you have consecutive years without an allocation, if that makes sense.
So all of the ones then that we're not seeing.
Yeah.
moved okay.
They're either, so like the top one, the beautification and the neighborhood association grants, those had been separate in years past, and then for next year, we're just kind of lumping it into one lump, so.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Sure. So any questions on that before I go on to the other funds? All right. So again, as the manager mentioned, these are a lot of the funds that we deal with in Public Works have their own revenue source that comes from a bunch of different sources. The one on the screen here is the water fund. Obviously, that comes from revenues we receive from our residents' bills and, of course, our wholesale and so forth. You see the projected revenues there of just shy of $15 million. As we discussed at a work session a couple months ago, that does include that debt service fee of $1.2 million, and that's based on the amount that we paid in the last fiscal year for debt service on the bonds that we've expended to make capital improvements in the last fiscal year. That fee will be distributed on what we call as a meter equivalent basis. So basically, if a standard residential account pays just as a factor 1, everybody whose meter is larger than that pays a similar proportion larger, right? So if you have a 2-inch meter because you're a small industrial or large commercial user, you would pay what's known as a meter equivalency factor greater than 1. I don't recall the specific numbers off the top of my head, but in round numbers, a 2-inch meter might be a factor of 10 compared to a residential of 1. So it will be distributed to the residences, and businesses and all accounts within the city, not though to our wholesale customers as proposed. Different way. Projected expenses, $12.8 million. You see that that's a fair amount lower than the projected revenues, and that is a recognition that the water fund needs to increase its cash reserves. It's currently in the red, and so we've got to get back into the black, as you see there, and that's what that is representing. Major projects that we're planning in the next year, actually that should be 1.7 million worth of lead service line replacements in the Marsh Field neighborhood, and then an additional 2.3 million that we anticipate will be happening in late July, early August as a part of an additional round of DW funding. That's that revolving loan fund that we talked about last meeting. I've got a similar slide on the sewer, but if there's any questions before.
Questions, commissioners? I do, but I'm wondering how deep in the weeds I might be getting, and it might be better just to chat with you offline versus going through it right now. For the sake of time, of everyone's collective time, I'll speak with you separately.
Sounds good. Happy to do it. All right, so similarly, sewer fund paid for by the bills that we collect from our residents. In this case, we are not the wholesale entity, so most of that money that we collect comes from our residents specifically and goes back out the door to the wholesaler, in this case, the county wastewater system. Again, debt service fee, as discussed, is shown there. We have had less projects in the previous fiscal year and in the past in the sewer fund, so we had less of a need. In this case, $473,000. Again, that will be split on that same meter equivalent basis to the charge. And if I didn't mention that on the previous slide, I apologize. again, that debt service idea that we discussed a few work sessions ago, we really think is a transparent and fair way to go about it, because as the payments for those capital projects fall off, so does the bills of our residents go down. So do they. Just one project category, which is again that late July, early August round of revolving fund money that we anticipate worth about $2.8 million. I'll just mention that on the previous slide and this one, the amount shown on those revolving fund projects is the city's bonded portion. So the actual amount of those projects, as the state as we and the state will pay for them to be done, is up near $10 million. It's 9 point something. But after the principal forgiveness is taken off of those projects, you get the numbers presented to you, and then those numbers are then bonded over the course of 20 years at a extreme sewer or water.
Commissioners, Ramsey.
I'm confused. So our projected revenues are 13 million and our projected expenses are 10. So we're not in the hole.
Correct.
Can you go back to the previous slide? Our projected revenues are 14 million and our projected expenses are 12 million. But you said we were in the hole. Where's the hole?
So the water and sewer funds are separate. Mm-hmm. In the case of the water fund, the hole is an existing hole. So over the course of the last 2 years,
Mm-hmm.
1 million in fiscal year 22, and then an additional million in this current fiscal year, we have spent more than we have received. So there's a $2 million hole in the water fund budget.
That is not being accounted for in the 3 lines. So it's not included in the debt service fee revision of 1.2 million that's coming out of the projected revenues, right? So that's why there's an additional.
If it weren't for the debt service fee proposal, the revenues would be only 13.6 million, which would erase a portion of our hole, but not the whole debt that we have in the water fund.
Right. So even though this looks like on our sewer fund that we are making more money than we're spending, it's not actually happening that way because of the debt at the bottom, the 2 million.
Well, in the sewer fund, because the debt service fee as a rate making methodology would be applied to the water bill and sewer bill. They're combined, right? Mm-hmm. That is included in those revenues. So without the sewer debt service fee, the sewer fund projected revenues would be about 12.7. In any case, in the sewer fund, we are not in the hole. We do not have very much cash in the fund.
So a deficit has been eliminated entirely, because that was the one that previously had a sizable deficit that forced us to do a significant increase. But now that deficit has been resolved, but we're still in a position that we need to build cash reserves.
Correct. The AWWA recommends you carry at least 6 months of expenses in your fund. So in this case, that would be something in the neighborhood of $5 or $6 million.
Oh, okay.
And we have about 0. So
right.
We're in the process of building up those reserves so that next time the water comes up, hopefully we're in a better position.
Well, 0 is better than being in the hole a couple million.
Absolutely.
Like we were, so that's progress.
Thank you, Dan.
You bet.
All right, any other questions for Director Vanderhyde at this time? No?
Major streets, excuse me. This is another fund we track separately. It's funded almost exclusively by the gas tax revenues that you pay at the pump and by the registration fees that you pay to the state. They give that money back to us according to a complicated formula that's based on population and miles of streets. There you see the revenues that the state projects that they will give to us this year. They put those projections out each year based on their audited gas tax monies and so forth. This is the year that the previous increases to the state gas tax reach their full effect, if that makes sense. So if you'll recall, when the gas tax increases were passed a few years ago, They were phased in over time, and this year is the year that they reach their full potential, so to speak. There are other supplementary revenues that the state has put in there. The state puts out a 3-year revenue forecast each year, and although I don't know the details of where they're projecting those revenues will come from in the future, they do not show it going down. And so it seems as though even though the taxes have reached their peak in terms of taking effect, they don't anticipate that that will result in, lessening revenues in the future, if that makes sense. So I don't think we'll see that number go down anytime soon, but it just won't be going up as fast, I guess is a shorter way to say that. You see our projected expenses are a bit below those revenues, although, as we'll say in a minute here, a portion of that money is going to go to the local streets. The major projects that we have online for this year is Sherman. That is from Seaway to the west, not quite all the way to Barclay. That again is just the city's portion of that project. The total cost of that project is just over $2 million. A portion of that is federal gas tax monies that are coming through our West Michigan Shoreline Regional Development Commission. They're the ones who distribute those federal gas tax dollars, and a portion is a grant from the State Department of EGLE, Environment, Great Lakes, and Energy. We're going to be using crumb rubber or recycled tires in the concrete on that project. We'll be, as far as I can tell, the first to do that in the state, and probably the first to do that in several states around us. And the state is helping fund that project in order to do testing over time and so on and so forth. And actually, I'll be back to you at our next meeting, our next traditional commission meeting, to ask for formal approval and award of that project. We've got $300,000 in railroad crossing improvements proposed at Southern Avenue and also at Terrace Point. And then a rehabilitation project on Keating Avenue east of 31 in the industrial park. I'm just going to jump to local streets because they're very similar. Again, projected revenues, that comes from the state. You see our projected revenues are higher than revenues in this case. We receive not even enough money to maintain our local streets from a snow plowing and pothole patching perspective from the state. And so in this case, in order to spend more than we're receiving, there will be a transfer from the major street fund to the local street fund, which is perfectly allowable by the state, and that will be to repair the streets in the East Marshfield neighborhood, just southwest of Getty and Laketon. After we go through and replace the lead service lines in that area, we'll be leaving the road full of patches and in pretty poor condition, so we're going to go through and make that. Any questions on the street funds?
Commissioner Hood?
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. Local streets. This doesn't seem like a lot for local streets. So, how much work do you see we getting done with our local streets?
So, local streets are definitely a big challenge for us. Like I said, we receive less even than it just takes to keep them clear of snow and, essentially open and functional, right? Any capital improvements we make, any improvements to the condition of the road, really comes out of our own pocket. So in this case, we've got some excess revenue in the major street funds that we're going to transfer over to local. We're fortunate. Our major streets are in much better condition than our locals right now. But otherwise, other sources of revenue would have to be found, whether that's general fund or, dare I say it, a millage of some kind, right? There really is. The state does not anticipate improving the local street funding situation anytime soon. Therefore, they've essentially left it up to the local communities. And there are other communities in West Michigan that have things like a local street millage in order to improve. In the past, we have previous administrations of public works, I'll say, have, advocated for a special assessment type way of going about it, where if your neighbors want their street improved, they have to pay for it out of their own pocket, things like that. I don't necessarily advocate for that, but it's just an example of how creative folks have had to get in order to be able to improve the condition of the streets.
So, okay, last question. So there is no real funding that comes in for the local streets, except for the little that we did get. And as a city, we don't have a fund for our local streets.
We have this fund, but it really is just a pass-through fund. Essentially, whatever we receive from the state each year gets spent on snow plowing and pothole patching on those local streets. And
Street sweeping.
often we're transferring money either from the general fund or the major street fund into the local fund, even just to make it whole at that point.
Are any general fund transfers contemplated in this budget?
Not relative to local streets, because normally there would be, but because the major street fund is a little healthier this year than normal, the transfers from the major street fund to local street fund this year.
Thank you. Commissioner Ramsey.
Yeah, I have just one final, it's a statement, not a question. And I don't know how to do it, so I don't want anyone to answer this, but Commissioner Hood asked some really great questions, and what I want to know is, if we're only using the dollars that come in from the state, and these are pass-through funds, for our local streets, and we aren't putting any direct, and maybe I'm wrong, but what I heard was, we're not doing any direct, I don't want to call it fundraising, but you know what I'm saying? Like, we don't have any dollars that are coming in at some point that are dedicated to expenses in local streets. How do we move forward, Director Grant and Jonathan, with identifying some sort of money that's coming into this community, either through our parking tickets or the beach passes, or something that's got to be better than nothing, right? So if we don't give it some sort of attention, nothing's ever going to happen, and the money from the state is never going to get any better or be any more consistent. So what are you guys doing as a team to work on identifying those dollars that we can earmark for our local streets, because we can't anymore? I mean, as Commissioner Hood so politely shared, I mean, they're just kind of junk, right? Right. And so how do we fix that on our own backs if we can't trust the state of Michigan to pony up?
Well, this is, thanks, Dan. This is one of the reasons we have these budget discussions. So
I don't expect you to answer it, Jonathan.
No,
like, but I'm just saying, like, maybe that could be a subject at our next budget.
Question.
It's a rhetorical question. It's a rhetorical question, but come back with an answer in 6 months with your next budget.
Well, I don't want to wait that long, but I think it's a very good question, and I think this is why I do budget discussions this way, is that we can have a discussion, or you all can have a discussion as the commission on where your priorities are, and is it to take dollars that we might have a little bit of extra here or there to do transfers in to do more roads, or to do street lighting, or to paint Western Avenue orange. I don't know. That's why we have these budget discussions, because this is, as much as this is the staff budget, this is the commission's budget. These are what your priorities are as the representatives of our community. So, specifically to your question, Commissioner Ramsey, there could be, a millage of some kind, and I don't necessarily think that's the right way to go. Or we can look to say, from a priority standpoint, as we're looking at the budget, if we have extra dollars, extra in quotation marks, that we're trying to figure out how, discretionary dollars, that's probably the better way to say it. If there's discretionary dollars, where do those things fall on a priority list? And the way I would kind of see some of these budget discussions working in the future is, prior to us even sitting down and having a budget discussion earlier in the year, would be just, pie in the sky, what are your priorities? And then that helps to inform budgets going forward. So that's the best that I can say is, like, as we have our discretionary spending, where do we see those discretionary dollars going? Right now, the proposal those numbers we were talking about at the beginning of the budget, a number of these things are discretionary. Now, there's not a ton of money here to do a lot of road stuff, but these things are discretionary in theory. Now, these are all things that we've identified as staff that are needed, but that's one of the reasons that we're in this, that we're having this discussion.
I have a follow-up, Mr. Mayor.
Yes, Commissioner Ramsey.
I want to thank you, Mr. Manager and Director Grant, for sharing that sentiment. I don't think that discretionary funds is the commitment that I'm looking for. I would like a commitment. I have a neighborhood that is on the southeast corners of Getty and Laketon that is primarily dirt roads, and I'm sure everybody's ward has a dirt road, right? Right, but a ton of young families live over there because it's very, very affordable housing. And so those kids have got to get to school, and they are literally wading through some sort of Great Lake of their own just to walk to the bus stop. And so while I think that discretionary sounds great if we need to fix some potholes, but that is not the case in some of my neighborhoods. And so I have to be here to advocate for those people and say that I would hope that you guys could find something that's a little more committed, and that we can really talk about how we can start in those neighborhoods that are most affected with crap streets, so that we can get these kids to school safely, at least in the middle of the winter, and then grow out from there.
So
thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Ramsey. Would that mean you might support my proposal from a couple months ago, where we commit where we commit excise tax revenues from the cannabis operations to local streets?
I absolutely would. Would it include streetlights, Mr. Mayor?
Because didn't hear that.
I think we're onto this slide now.
Yeah. No, but right, but see, and that's what I'm saying.
Yeah, because at the time I was saying we've got so much we want to put in our social equity program that leaves a balance. Let's put some of those towards these types of capital projects that we know need to get done. And we haven't given as much attention or investment into our local streets as we would like over years because of fiscal constraints.
Yeah.
And now we are getting to a position that we can make more investments into our city, but the needs are so extensive that we still need to prioritize. And we're still be in a position that we can just throw money at our local streets, even as much as we might like to do so.
Right.
Presently, unless you are creating new revenue sources, we're just moving funds around. And so moving more funds into that would take it from someplace else.
Yes.
And that's why I had the notion of well, perhaps we could take a percentage or a portion of our excise tax revenues separate from the social equity program and commit those to our local streets. So we've got additional dollars being committed to our local streets.
Right.
Because it sounds like
we all want.
I shouldn't say we all want, but it sounds like
nervous.
there's a good amount of support to be putting more resources into our local streets.
Absolutely.
Which I think that takeaway just needs to be received for our professional staff to look at how we might be able to piece some more dollars together or get them into our local streets. Is that a general fund transfer? Are there other grant opportunities out there? Do we have to look at a millage? Because when you talk about non-discretionary funds, that's a millage. When you talk about committed dollars, that's a millage.
Yeah.
Like having a millage and having those dollars every year being earmarked solely for that purpose. And so that would be a committed revenue stream. But I don't know how receptive our community or even this commission would be to a new millage. I certainly would like us to get to a position of lowering taxes.
Absolutely not.
But I also recognize that we have critical needs.
Right, and so I think that you and I, Mr. Mayor, are very special in that we sometimes just share a stream of consciousness when we're talking. And so I never want to direct staff from that stream of consciousness or try to gain support. But when you guys are looking at these things, I mean, as the mayor mentioned several weeks back, he spoke about this, and now I'm hitting on it again. Like, how are we looking at that, even though we're just kind of throwing all these things at you, know that they're important? How do we prioritize, like both the mayor and the manager have said? Because we know that there are other needs. I'm sure there are needs in every single ward in this community. Every single ward, on every single street, there is a need that we can identify. And those are the needs that we need to start talking about so that our neighbors trust that when we do make these other changes to their community and what appears to be sweeping motions to them, that the outcome is so we can address the crappy streets on Valley. And maybe it won't be as hard for the rest of us in the street.
Yeah, good conversation. And we have streets and needs all across the city. That's for sure.
Yeah.
But Commissioner Hood?
Okay, the infrastructure money, is that the what we get for the roads? Is that through the infrastructure?
So this is the local road budget for this year, and then this is the major. Yeah, so for the road specifically, yeah. And this is plowing, pothole filling, paving, all that kind of stuff. One thing that we do to try and defray some of the costs are, as we're doing water and sewer line projects, those other funds, those dollars can kind of get spread out a little bit more. So through our capital improvement planning, we kind of layer those projects together and say, okay, if, what's the condition of this water line, this sewer line, this road, and looking at those in the aggregate, where are those dollars going to have the most impact? So that is from the infrastructure side. That's how we do that.
Okay. That makes sense. I mean, like everyone just said, it's a lot.
Yeah.
That needs to be done.
Yeah.
Do we have a current?
Go ahead.
Do we have a current policy? You know how we created a policy a couple years ago, and this was before your rival Manager Seifert. But it was where if neighbors wanted to get their alleyway paved, but there was a process to do so. They collect, they either get monetary contribution from their neighbors, and then they come to the city and it gets on the project list for the alleyway to be paved. Do we have some type of policy in which case a road that's of certain condition, or worse, those neighbors could collectively act on petitioning the city to reconstruct or repair their road, in connection with them also kicking in something, whatever dollar amount that may be or percentage that may be, to try to move their project up earlier, with the caveat that it needs the work, not just, I want a new road, but like it meets certain criteria. Do we have anything like that, or?
You got the special assessment process. Is that you're talking about the special assessment process?
It would end up being a special assessment. I don't know what the parameters for that, because I think we have got just a standalone special assessment where we charge the property owners the full amount. Whereas the alleyway, they're not being charged the full amount. The city is kicking in. So I'm just wondering maybe kind of that hybrid approach where if streets meet a certain condition or worse, neighbors come together, they're willing to share that cost burden, and then the city will kick in some funds as well. Although that would require a certain level of discretionary bucket of money in our local streets that we don't necessarily have right now. So I don't know what our current policy is, if it's just that strictly you pay for it all for a special assessment, or if we have another variant of that, or maybe that's something for a further conversation and work session. If the commission is very much interested in trying to create more tools for our citizenry to seek repairs and improvements to their roads.
Yeah, we don't have anything like that, currently, other than, as you say, the full, quote unquote, full special assessment process. I could certainly envision a policy that's, loosely based on the alley paving policy that we developed that specifically states it's not a special assessment, but a, cost share kind of situation. But as you said, I think the key to a policy like that would be perhaps to set a certain amount of dollars that the city can afford to spend each year, right? And maybe that's higher than we have, but set a certain amount that the city can afford to spend each year, because that would be certainly my concern, is we would receive, a lot of need, frankly, and there is a lot of need, more probably than the city could afford to support if the neighbors were to be, taking great advantage of such a program. Because the alley paving policy, as an example, is a very good deal for our residents. Conversely, we could develop a policy that isn't such a great deal for our residents. It does put most of the cost onto them, but I would argue the special assessment process already exists for that.
Okay, so something for further consideration and conversation on that. Did you have something?
Yeah, I would
Commissioner Gorman?
not me, but someone in my household did follow that process for Pigtail Alley because our part of Second Street is in great condition. But it was a very easy process and a great way to engage your neighbors and to, come together on the agreement of the quality of the roads. But DPW did put us then in line to let us know what the forecast of projects were and where that would fit in. So it didn't happen the year we did it, but we know it's coming. So I mean, I think it's good. That's all.
Thank you for the insights and your experience. Oh yes, I'm sorry, Commissioner Ramsey, Vice Mayor German did have a question.
Oh yeah, how about it?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Johnson. Couple questions there, and just on the comments, questions for Commissioner Hood and Commissioner Ramsey. You know, we definitely have issues with our streets, and taxpayers are definitely all the time asking, you know, one of us about our streets, and I'm quite sure each and every one of us has heard that repeatedly. Yeah, if what I'm not in favor of is a millage for sure. I'll tell you that. But I think trying to find some creative ways so we could expedite or try to get the streets that really need to be repaired and that infrastructure. But also, the manager mentioned about the water and sewer. Maybe you can expound on this, Director Van der Heide, the Sanford Street project that's going on here. It's going very well. I've talked with the construction workers and stuff like that. I live on Sanford, so I'm very impressed with what's going on. But just the time and oversight, what it takes to do a project like that, you know, actually talking with them and seeing what they do, and they coming into the house, drilling in your house, water line out to the street. You know, that's a lot of work and planning, and it takes a skill. So I know you work with that team and you oversee stuff like that. And Mr. Evans at that time when he was in your position, then even our deputy director, Mike Sell, she's touched on being part of that. But if you could just talk about some things and how the project is going, when it's due, what's happening, because since this is being televised, the residents could see and hear it from someone that specializes and has the expertise, what it takes for a project like that.
Sure, yeah, that might be a good sort of frame of reference for this conversation. So for those who aren't aware, we're rebuilding Sanford Street from Laketon to Apple. We are doing the sanitary sewer almost all the length of that distance. We're doing all new water service lines throughout the project, and we're doing some water main work on top of that as well. Sanford Street, when we started, was a little wider than your average residential street. When we're done, it will be the same width as most residential streets in the city, although there will be portions that will have bus parking and other things like that. That mile of street is taking about $6 million to rebuild. Almost all of that is part of the state revolving fund program that we've been talking about. So those are payments that we will be making from the sewer and water funds over the course of the next 20 years to pay for that work. It's at a very good rate, so it's not. When I say that, don't get the impression that we're sacrificing future dollars necessarily to make improvements today. It's at a low enough rate that we're actually probably beating the rate with our investments, right, so to speak. So I won't call it free money, but it's very close to that. So just to give you the context, 1 mile of street, $6 million, and now granted that includes a lot of utility improvements, but as we discussed the other night, most of our streets need utility improvements as well, in particular our local streets. So if it's $6 million per mile, and we have something like 120 miles of local streets, now we begin to understand the enormity of the problem that we face, right? $1 billion off the top of my head, if I did that math right.
Sobering statistics.
So,
Commissioner St. Clair? Oh, I'm sorry, Commissioner Ramsey.
No, you're not.
You had your hand up first. I saw Commissioner's hand go up, and she hasn't
Hit it, sister.
interjected, so I went straight to her.
A couple of things come to mind. One, I would be very concerned about the idea of doing a special assessment that neighbors could contribute and the city would match or contribute. That is definitely going to set up for an unequitable situation where the folks with money get the work and the folks with money that get their needs met and the folks without are always at the back of the line. I also have some thoughts about millage or not millage. Somebody correct me if I'm wrong, but would a millage not need to be a public vote?
Yes.
So I don't think it's for us to say whether we would support a millage or not support a millage. That is for the voters to decide. I think it behooves us to be very clear-eyed about this, that the little pieces and snippets and pockets of money that we can creatively scrape together is not the $1 billion that we need. And we're not going to get $1 billion in a millage either. But I think that it's not for us to say what we will or won't pursue for the people, because I know all of you have heard more about the streets than probably any other thing as commissioners. So that tells me that the public knows that there is a problem. I think they're intelligent individuals who understand that you can't create money and that tax dollars are tax dollars are tax dollars, and we can't generate enough new income. And we're trying really hard. You know, we're doing the best we can. Thank you, development team. But, you know, I just really want to caution us about being so definitive about what we will or won't do, especially on things that aren't really our say. I think if the community wants to support a millage, then it is our duty to let them have a shot at that. And if they absolutely shoot it down, then they've had a shot at that too. That's all.
Thank you, Commissioner St. Clair. Commissioner Ramsey?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. No, Commissioner St. Clair said exactly what I wanted to say about the not so equitable process of that shared cost, and how it would even further break down neighborhoods that don't currently experience a marginalization based on SES, because everything is so homogenous anyway. It will definitely take a street and show you where the people that have and the people have not that live on that street. And we don't want to do that any further. So while I'm sure there is a way to do it, that might not be the top of the way. And then noted, Commissioner St. Clair, that while I don't think that our people would support a millage, they didn't the last time we tried it, I would absolutely say put it on the ballot again, because they get to decide. So thank you for that.
Commissioner Hitt?
I think one of the things that threw people off that didn't was when we add other things in on that millage. You know, and then the distrust comes in. Okay, so if we vote for this millage, and they're saying we're going to get roads done, but then they also got in here street lights or something else. Okay, we're not going to get as much. We're not going to get the roads done like we want them done. But I think if there's something in there that's just specifically stating that the roads, I agree. Let the people decide on the vote. You know, because the money's just not going to come out of nowhere. We see that.
It's $1 billion. I mean, there's no way.
Right.
You can get as creative as you want to. It's not going to happen.
And I think one of the things that we have going for us on it from a communication standpoint is, you know, all the planning that the division and department heads do on our asset management, on our capital improvement plan. We can clearly communicate, as Dan did. This is, sorry, Director Vanderhyde. I keep calling them by their first names this afternoon. I'm sorry, guys. That we know what those numbers are. We know where the roads are and how those dollars can be invested. And coupling that with the other needs that are known regarding water and sewer, then you can even start stacking those even more, and have more of an impact, and an impact that you don't have to dig up in a couple years to replace a water line, because there's nothing more frustrating than
Touching it twice.
Yeah, than touching it twice. And so, and we try to work with our utility partners at DTE and consumers and telecom companies to make sure that, or not to make sure, but to make every effort that that we get all those projects done at once. So there could be a communication opportunity there. We would look to you guys as the commission on how y'all want that communicated, and if that's a road we want to go down. It's not something that we had prepared or even fathomed in this budget, but if that's something that y'all would like us to continue to think about, we can have that discussion.
And to be fair,
Yes.
I did say I didn't expect an answer, but if we're
I
going to
know.
talk about this, let's talk about it. Let's
Yeah.
talk about finding a solution and having it be a commitment and not something that's off the side of our desk, because it will never happen. We're never going to get $1 billion, just like the commissioner said, from cobbling together a couple of underexpended accounts. Thank you, Mr. Manager. Sorry, Mr. Mayor. I didn't intend for it to go all there, but here we are.
Commission discussion.
Back to commission discussion.
Yeah, so is your expectation then, so still on streets and street funding and how do we get more resources to bear, is your expectation then, based on what you're hearing tonight, to do further engagement, not only on this topic with the commission, but with the community? Because as has been noted, our electorate who ultimately decides on any millage, if we go that route, will be incumbent upon the commission to approve putting that on the ballot, which there, depending on the election cycle, there's a cost for us by putting that on the ballot. So I wouldn't just really want to throw something on the ballot.
Right.
I would like to engage, from my perspective, engage the community to understand what direction they would like us to go. If there is considerable support for putting something on the ballot, then sure, let's get it on the ballot and let the people decide. From my personal experience, I think it was 2014 and 2015, we had two different road millages that were on the ballot. Both got shot down. The second one was tweaked in order to make it more palatable to the community, and that also included more strict, this money has to go towards X, Y, and Z, but did require a raising of our cap on the millage, I think, which left some people a little leery. It was raising the cap on our millage rate. However, we did have that language saying this is strictly going to be going for X, Y, Z of our streets, and that also got shot down. So I think we are far enough removed from them that time that it isn't necessarily feeling like we're just going back to the well again and again and again until it gets approved. I think that we are far enough removed time-wise that I don't necessarily think our residents would, be upset with that question. But I do think some further engagement with the community and the commission could be helpful to guide us on that question. Commissioner St. Clair?
And thank you. Just to clarify, I'm not saying a millage is the answer. I'm just saying we can't leave it off the table. It's something that we have to talk about and consider. So before everyone at home hears, I'm not saying you raise your taxes. I'm just saying we should ask.
Yeah, no.
So
And I would like to, think creatively. Like the program, and I fully understand and respect the position on the equity piece. I had the same concern back in 2013 when some folks in Harbortown said, hey, we'll put up 25% of this rework, you pay the rest, and they got it moved to the front of the line. I was like, whoa, that's not fair or equitable. But trying to get creative in terms of how we can work with our residents to move road construction projects forward, where there is a shared cost. But I understand the equity concerns at the same time. But it's a matter of how you, if we were to move that forward, how would you craft it in a way that it shows it is a necessity, it isn't putting, an onerous burden on the property owner. And I'm thinking the property owner, so that could be a quasi-special assessment, not for the full cost, but a special assessment on the property owner, which could then also go to lessening the impact on some of our more marginalized communities, who may be renters, not property owners, unless it gets passed. Well, that now I'm going down a rabbit hole. But this is something that I think is going to merit its own dedicated conversation on streets. Yeah.
earlier today I made the comment, the first time you give a budget presentation in a new community, you never know how the conversation's going to go or what the commission's going to want to hear from, and I was not anticipating this part of the conversation. So, I would say, I think it's worth the commission having a more in-depth discussion on it, and to let us probably get through this budget process and then allow staff to kind of take a deeper dive into what those numbers look like. I don't think it'll take staff that long to understand that because of the capital improvement plan and things of that nature, so we could have that discussion. Now, how it would relate to different funding mechanisms, that might take a little bit more time. But I think that we would welcome that discussion, and I think it would be educational for all of us, and provide the commission with the tools and the verbiage to be able to engage with your constituents about what this looks like, and what that long-term big number is, and how many streets we're talking about, miles of streets and things like that. I do know that whenever you start talking about miles of streets, it is something that people, even who work in this field sometimes, like, wow, I can't believe we have that many miles. And then when you start thinking about that and how that translates into, how long it takes to, get through the whole city during a snowstorm, and tons of salt, and patching potholes, and repaving, and road patrol for the fire, or for the police department, and response times for the fire department, ambulances, and how all those things come together. So, yeah.
Street sweeping.
Commissioner Vice Mayor German.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. A lot that was said. I agree with a lot of it when it comes to getting our street fixed, and to the mayor's point of being creative, finding a way to hopefully find resources to repair the streets. But as for a millage, again, I would state that again, I am not in favor of a millage, and I've heard that from the commission 2 times that came to the commission, and the voters voted it down. This says it's right there that they were not interested in a millage. Again, it would be up to them. But as you stated also, Mayor Johnson, the community engagement, I think, is huge. Now that we have a community engagement personnel staff to reach out, have these discussions, and if the proposal for a millage could be directed to guarantee certain streets that we fix these streets, or however the proposal or the millage would be directed to a millage, I think will be essential. But for the most part of it, I know some areas are need a lot more repair than certain areas, and we have to look at what each neighborhood needs, because again, and I've said this before, what happens in Ward 2, the needs may be different in another ward. So we have to really look at that, and then the equity piece that Commissioner St. Clair talked about also, I thought was a very important point too. So definitely going to have to take some discussions and be creative in how we look for resources, but again, to serve the citizens in the community in a way that they will be satisfied and see that their tax dollars are being, used wisely. So.
Thank you, Vice Mayor German. Commissioners, any other questions or commentary at this time? Seeing none.
Okay. So kind of the process going forward, if you do have feedback for me off of off the meeting, please let me know. We're going to start putting together the budget book based on the presentation, and we are going to have some slightly different communication tools, specifically aimed at residents. We're going to be developing your tax dollars at worksheet, a one pager, two-sided, that will talk about, revenues, expenses, in a pictorial format, that hopefully, folks can easily digest. That'll be part of your budget book. Or will come out just after your budget book, depends on how some of the process goes. And, we'll start putting that together for you to look at, in 2 weeks at your work session. And then it'll be on that first meeting in June. If needed, we can table that until the second meeting, because that will still be before July 1.
And what's the outlook on when we can expect to receive the budget book?
Well, we're not really hearing any major changes, so we can start putting the budget book together this week, I guess. Yeah.
Just want to thank everyone. Jonathan and I have come together with a new format that he and the department has to work together to get this budget together. So I want to thank everyone and their help in putting this budget together. After tonight, we already start looking at how we're going to put the book together. It's going to look a little different from the past with the direction of Jonathan. So we're going to start working on that tomorrow, and hopefully have that to you within Thursday or so you can start looking at it. Okay.
Well, our font size.
It's going to be
smaller.
It's going. We're going to do it digital so you can zoom in on it.
Perfect.
Thank you, Director Grant. Commissioner Ramsey?
Yeah, did I mess this up and we didn't get to hear about these, Jonathan, or are you not done? General highlights.
We touched on.
We touched on those.
We touched on the marina, the arena.
Yep. Yeah, that's where I was talking about doing investments.
You even had investable outburst on
right.
that slide.
Yeah.
Oh, good. Kudos on calling them investments.
Okay, good.
Did I miss anything else?
Mr. Manager, did you are you looking for any specific feedback or first blush thoughts on your project, your general fund project list?
Sure.
Some of these are budgeted already, other ones are, still
so
TBD, or do you just want to talk to us individually, or are you looking for any kind of response this evening?
I guess what I was looking for, if there were any red flags that you saw on anything. These are built into the budget. So the budget proposal that you will get
already has all these.
Already has all these in here. If there was, obviously many of these are above staff's approval threshold, so they would come back to you for actual expenditures after the budget's approved. But because these items, the ones that are on the screen now, the public improvement dollars, because these are projects, I wanted to talk to you about these, because these are things that, honestly, say we can easily change out, because there are some that would kind of have a domino effect. If we didn't do one, it would affect things in the following year. But I wanted you guys to have this information as we move forward, because a lot of times when you get that budget book, it's so dense. It's general ledger lines that have these things that are kind of smushed in there, so it can kind of be hard to suss these things out. So these are the areas where these are big dollar amounts of money that we're spending on one-time projects that I wanted you to be aware of. But then also just know that, structurally the budget is good. We're not running a structural deficit or anything like that. We are recommending dipping into our fund reserves a bit, but we're about double where our fund balance should be for our operating purposes. So we want to use a little bit of that to do these one-time projects that we've either had delayed because of COVID or delayed because of various other reasons, that will help us function better as an organization, but then also doing these community investments that we talked about and things like that.
So all these capital projects are included in the
They
current
are,
budget
they
that's
are,
forthcoming.
yes.
And then that would put us, though, would require us to dip how much into our general fund reserves to
Is it
cover?
900? Yeah, 900,000, and we're sitting at 9. So, yeah. And these, the revenues are conservatively budgeted. The expenses are, I don't want to say liberally budgeted, but they're,
We're generous.
They're practically budgeted. So, our hope would be that we would dip into that less. But we do have, more than enough cushion in there that we can do those things. And it's not supplementing ongoing expenses. That's the thing that I really wanted to stress with you guys. It's not supplementing our annual operating costs.
What's the year end for this fiscal year looking like? What's that shaping up to be in terms of our surplus, deficit, flat?
We're going to bring
Right now, sorry, I don't yell. The way we're doing our general fund budget, it looks like we're on pace to be like 400,000 in the plus. Income tax numbers are awesome this year, so I'm thinking about even bumping it up a little more, but I don't want to scare anyone. But but it looks like we're on pace to collect $11 million for income tax and maybe a little higher. I think we got it budgeted for 10.7, but income tax numbers are looking good. I'm just looking at them on my computer right now, so it might be even a little bit.
Okay.
500,000.
So let's say we do end the year with $400,000 surplus. That would just accrue to our general fund reserves, and then this coming year, if we're looking to draw down $900,000, essentially we're kind of using that $400,000 we just put in there, and then we'd be using another $500,000 potentially.
Yeah, it's just so hard to project out the income tax numbers because we got to go 2 months after June 30th, so I don't know what the numbers are. So it's just kind of shooting in the dark, but they're looking really good. So I think we're going to have.
Okay, excellent.
One of the ways that I try to explain surplus or fund balance, fund balance is our savings account. And the analogy that I always use is if you have money in your savings account and you need to put a new roof on your house, you're probably not going to get a home equity loan. You're probably going to spend some of your money out of your savings account. So you're going to spend more than you took in that year, most likely. But it's money that has come in at a different point, that we've earned at a different point, that's sitting there for those type of one-time projects. So those projects that we were pointing out are things that fall into that category. The boiler replacement isn't necessarily a cool project, but it's something that we need to do for the building, for the health and life of the building, and to reduce our energy consumption here. Finishing the remodel on the second floor allows us to do other things in the building. So it's things that we're able to do with previously earned revenue that we didn't spend for whatever purpose. So, but we always start the budget process from, can we pay our people and do the operations that we need to do on a daily basis without dipping into fund reserves? Yes, we can. It's just this small amount in for these kind of one-time projects. So.
All right, that sounds good. Structurally sound. And we have opportunities to make further investments. Sounds great. Questions, comments, commissioners? All right. Well, thanks so much, Mr. Manager, and thank you, Finance Director, and all of our directors and leadership team for your work on this budget process, which is quite the undertaking each year, and there's always curveballs that happen. So I do believe there's an action item, but I don't see
An agenda?
the agenda here. But so no one has the motion.
I do.
You do have it?
She always has the motion.
Okay, you do have it. Okay.
I found it.
So do you want to kick us off?
Yes. I move to approve the request from Core 6 Charities to be recognized as a nonprofit in the city of Muskegon for the purpose of obtaining a charitable gaming license.
Support. We have a motion by Commissioner St. Clair, supported by Commissioner Ramsey. And Madam Clerk, would you like to report out on this item?
Absolutely. Muskegon Pride did come to us a couple of weeks ago, and we did approve them for a charitable gaming license, and they did go to the state to get that approved. It turns out, though, they have an actual legal name that the state requires that they have on this license, which was the Core 6 Charities. So they need to have us approve the Core 6 Charities as they're on their gaming license instead of the Muskegon Pride. So that is just a simple change for us, but a big change for them.
Okay. So a little technical housekeeping.
Yes, correct.
So to speak. Commissioner St. Clair, Commissioner Ramsey, do you have anything to ask or add on this? I do not. No? Commissioners, anything else to ask or add? All right. Roll call, please.
Commissioner St. Clair,
Yes.
Mayor Johnson,
Yes.
Commissioner Hood,
Yes.
Commissioner Ramsey,
Yes.
Vice Mayor German,
Yes.
Commissioner Gorman,
Yes.
Commissioner Emery.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you. Next up, we do have public comment. I have one public comment form. There's still time if you wish to give public comment. There are forms at the back of the room. Please provide your name and address. Note I will not share your address publicly, nor ask you to provide that publicly. And you'll have up to 3 minutes to provide remarks. I'll invite you up to the podium. And folks at home, there will be a phone number scrolling across the bottom of your screen here momentarily. You'll have an opportunity to phone in as well and have up to 3 minutes to give your remarks. So first up, I have Ann Vandermolen joining us from the city of Roosevelt Park. Welcome, Ann. You have up to 3 minutes to provide your remarks.
Okay, sorry. This is directed to the Muskegon police. I have a story to tell. Please don't tie me just yet. Directed towards the Muskegon police. Okay, here I go. I went through terrible violence for a few years as a child. Then I lost a baby midterm in my pregnancy 20 years ago. I wanted to die the night I found out I lost my baby. But I went on to teach in Indiana after that. I tried dating a few of my ex-boyfriends from high school to escape the pain of losing my child. I tried to go back to a simpler time, but it didn't work. Then along came Tracy Lorenz. I truly thought he was divorced at first, and so we started seeing each other. He was violent with me on one occasion. He attacked me. But because I had severe depression from losing my baby, it didn't faze me at first. At the time, it was terrifying and humiliating. But because of my depression, my mind blocked it out, and he paid a lot of attention to me, so it was confusing. He called me his girlfriend and stayed and talked to me for a while, and then called me after he left, and then texted me after that. But I started to get angry. At first, I didn't even remember why I was so angry. I finally went and wrote that police report on his violence. At first, I just wanted my report documented, but when I followed up on my report, the Muskegon police told me that what he did wasn't a crime because I didn't break up with him soon enough. The Muskegon police shouldn't have judged me on that. They didn't know my mind blocked out his violence at first. They should have determined it to be violence, to be criminal. After about 6 years, Tracy and I got back in touch. We talked and texted for about 2 years because I wanted an apology, an explanation. He acted like we never broke up. He was always trying to prove where he was. 9 years ago, we met in, new phone. 9 years ago, we met in the old Kmart parking lot on Henry Street because he wanted to show me pictures to prove he had gone to the doctor. 3 years ago, he sent me a picture of a beautiful rainbow to prove where he was working. I never asked him to do that. The last time we talked on the phone last September, I finally had to vent my anger about his rage. I went through hell as a child. I didn't need Tracy's rage, and it was rage. He was controlling and violent. I had to finally let my anger out. So he called the cops and told them he didn't want me texting him anymore. And then he texted me after he called the cops. He also told them I was basically stalking him. So I had to go down to the Grand Haven police and show them many of his texts and phone calls. There are 2 other women that have complained to me about possible allegations against Tracy. And I think a county-wide investigation should be done. And he was violent.
Thank you, Ann.
Thank you.
For joining us this evening. Is there anyone else in the audience that wishes to give public comment at this time? No? Is there anyone on the phone that wishes to give public comment?
There is not, Mayor.
All right. Thank you. Commissioners, I'd entertain a motion.
I move to adjourn.
Support. We have a motion by Commissioner Hood, supported by Commissioner Emery, to adjourn. All in favor, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. All opposed, same sign. We are adjourned. Thank you. Take care. Be well.
Good night.